Right. We're back. I'm here with Andrea Mai, author of The Calm Way, and she has been asking me some incredible questions about the pathway to publication that I created for Books of Eden Publishing. So if you're on this video, it means you have watched the short introduction to phase 1. So now we are on phase 2. If you haven't watched that, I suggest you go back because it gives a little bit of context. But essentially, there's a 3-phase pathway to publication with Books of Eden. And we are going to look now at phase 2. Any questions before I jump into that?
Uh, let's do it. That's all I gotta say. Let's see what this phase two is. Phase one was rich, and if you haven't watched it, go watch it.
You are heartily invited to watch it.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's right. Don't boss people around, Andrea. Invite them.
Here we go with that was phase 1. So we're going to scroll down to phase 2. So by the end of phase 1, the content of your book is totally polished, done, complete. So now we enter phase 2, which is joyful design. This is where we look at all the different aspects of the physical presence of the book. So we're looking at what I called design and the deep resonant artistic presence of the book itself. So color, font, artwork, formatting, the way that the words reside on the page, we go into all of it. How is it visually received by the reader? So a big part of this is cover consultation. So we look into what kind of cover is really expressive of the deeper message and frequency of this book. And we look at some really practical things. Is it artwork? Is it a photograph? Is it abstract? Right? All these different things. The inside of the book, formatting and content design. Maybe it's only words, not only words, but maybe your book is comprised entirely of words. Maybe you have art you want to include, pictures, drawings, that kind of thing. So we look at all that. If you are at this phase in the process, in general, it means that you've been invited to be published by Books of Eden. So you would also receive an ISBN from Books of Eden. And I can go into ISBN and what that is and intellectual property and all that. But you would receive an ISBN from Books of Eden. You would get guidance on the front and back matter. So that's acknowledgments about the author, table of contents, a description for the back cover, an epigraph if you choose to have one. So all of that. And then this is also the point in the process where we'd start to look at who do we invite to write the foreword if you choose to have one. And a big part of writing the foreword is picking someone who really deeply understands what your book's message is. So at this point, if we invite that person, they still have time to read the book and write the foreword and or refuse, and then we have time to go on to the next person. It's all part of the process. So as I recently had my own my own experience of someone refusing to write my forward, which is fine. This is a big act of trust that the right person will step forward. So this is joyful design. Any questions or responses on that?
I love the way that you put that because often this is the most excruciating part of the book uh, creation process for many people. Uh, they don't really, they've been, unless they're sort of really familiar with publishing and have had experience, it's surprising how much misunderstanding or just no understanding there is of the amount of work that goes into that part of it. And um, so, yeah, I love that you're actually swaddling it in this joyful design so that you can invite that in because it can be a lot of fun. Um, it can also be, if it's overwhelming to you or you don't know the steps, that's when it is nice to have somebody to walk with through it. So,
This is also where, so for the book cover design, this is also where the Books of Eden community is really powerful, because if you have a book cover design or a couple different options, we can bring it to the community and ask for really loving, supportive feedback on what does this cover say, because there's no underestimating the power of the cover of the book. It is the first impression of the reader that the reader gets, and if it can communicate within the cover the full message and frequency of the book itself, you're going to get the right people picking up your book and looking at it further. So, and yeah, spoken like a true author. I mean, how many books have you written so far? 17? 1,000?
17 of my own, and I've worked on, I don't know, probably 9, I think, with other people, the full spectrum, you know. So, yeah, it can be, you're like, "Oh, it's done. My book is done." And you're like, "Wait a minute." No, it's not.
There is a bit. Yeah, that's why I made this. It's entirely its own phase, because it really is, it takes its own, it's like entering into a different way of thinking for this part of, and so I created an entirely separate phase for it. And if we
Yeah.
look at one of the things I like to offer for homework for authors who are at this phase is to go to a bookstore and just browse the covers, see what calls to them, feel
Mm.
into the types of covers that really attract them, the types of covers that maybe, if not maybe repel, sometimes repel, what style, ideas, frequencies, what's really compelling to you. And that's a really fun piece of homework to do. So like
Yeah.
if we looked at this book, for instance, this is my memoir, Finding Home. I had imagined originally like a really bright, colorful, inviting cover for this. And what ended up happening was someone got a picture. This is me. So it's a memoir. So it really made sense that the picture would be of me at a kind of a wild hot spring, kind of coming out of the water. And this ended up being a really deep kind of archetypal image within the book itself of this process of emerging into the fullest self. And so it's sepia toned, it's very kind of, it's not at all what I had originally thought it would be, but when it landed it was like, oh, that's the one, that's the one.
Right.
And so um it's
And
just,
then that
yeah.
that process, how long did it take you from you had this original sort of vision or image? How long did it take you to get to what you now have?
Gosh, that's a great question. It was part of maybe a 2-month process.
Yeah.
And for the 2 months, I wasn't only focused on the book cover. I was doing all those other things in phase two. But I had this really strong sense that when that picture arrived, that was somehow going to be the one. And it was totally different from what I'd been expecting. So yeah, and then the back matter, when we're talking about the description, what to put on the back, right? There's this writer I follow who he has this exercise, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done in writing, and it's to take your entire work and distill a summary of it into one sentence. And
Mm.
it's like that, I could write pages and pages and pages, but that one exercise is like the hardest thing. It's like this existential, deep existential, like lifting of the essence of the work. And um, that is not, that's a lot sometimes less fun than the go to a bookstore and look at book covers thing homework. But it is one of the things we do, is how would we talk about this book if we had one sentence,
Yeah.
And so the back of the book really emerges from that. So yeah, it's phase two is a lot of fun. It's a lot of cudgeling, exercising different parts of the brain that aren't normally maybe activated, especially in this process. And it's this great illumination. It can be just a really beautiful illumination of what the book is as it further reveals itself. So yeah, phase two, joyful design.
Oh, I love it.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
thank you for sharing that with me. Uh, Anything else you want to point out? What's your favorite part? I think that would be really important. What's your favorite part about working with someone, working with a client and helping them go through joyful design? I would love to hear that.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a great question. My absolute favorite part is the amount of discovery that happens in that phase. So, one of the things that and the amount of trust that it requires, because one of the things that as an editor, I like to nudge people toward staying very open-minded about what the final form actually wants to be. Because I know some people will walk in knowing exactly what they want their cover to be. And sometimes that is what it is. Sometimes it evolves over the course of writing the book. And so there's both this beautiful act of discovery, like continual discovery that happens, and almost like a coaching to stay really open-minded to what maybe more wants to come in, because sometimes at this phase we just want to have an answer.
Well, and what would you say to, okay, so I've been in the industry for a long time, been part of a lot of books, and I've seen authors who write brilliant books and their cover is all wrong for their genre, you know, uh, because they have maybe a different idea. And this is an interesting place specifically around as publishing and the language we're using and the way we're telling stories and what's being communicated. You know, you go to a bookstore, you go to an online store, you're looking at covers, and there's generally, every year or two, there are these trends. And then there's some things that are classic. Sometimes they're classically ugly, and but that's what they're famous for. It's all okay. Ooh, I'd be, well, maybe this is a question for a different, it's a whole conversation in itself, right? But that meeting what we would like to see. I had a client who he was very much enamored with sort of these old old covers, old styles of covers from books that were philosophical texts written in the 30s, 40s, 50s, It's not a thing that is necessarily current, but that is exactly what he saw, and no amount of um, encouragement could move him from that. And that to me was beautiful in that no matter what it was, right, wrong, or otherwise, from the established market, that was his design. But that's rare that somebody knows that. So I'm curious if that brings up anything for you and how you would guide someone.
Yeah, I love that, because I like to say that at a certain level, like I I'm the I work as an editor, but the book, like the author is the one who truly knows. So, but that's also, I think, a really powerful place for the focus groups to come in, because if I sense that the cover is not representative of the deeper wisdom and message and frequency of the book, hopefully at this point I will have developed the level of trust with the author that I can mention that or nudge that, or say very clearly the kinds of frequency I'm receiving from the cover, what the cover tells me about the book at a really subtle level, at those, like, the communicating without words level, like, but sometimes if we can have the cover with a focus group, then the focus group will be able to lift some of that up, especially if it's a loving, supportive focus group, which is the kind of thing we want to create with Books of Eden. And then they can receive, like, from people who have never seen it before, what do they think the book is about? What are their emotions on, beholding the cover? Does it invite them? Is it, and the other part of it is, like, there's about the cover that's just the wisdom of of these books is often timeless. So the cover is also can hold these timeless frequencies without following necessarily any trends. A lot of times it's hard to explain, but a lot of times these books, they exist. The books I work with are existing kind of at this level, that isn't really influenced by trends. It's kind of like the little black dress. Like it's always going to look good. It's classic. It's always going to look good. It's timeless. Like there's something about like these books where there may be like larger fields of receptivity that are coming up, but there's something about it that's timeless that isn't a trend. That's like it's like ancient wisdom spoken in a new way, deep wisdom,
Mhm.
eternal wisdom spoken in a new way through a new story. But there's
Yeah.
something anchored in that, like this
Yeah.
isn't just a flash in the pan. This will be the kind of thing that in 3 generations people are still reading and getting deep understanding from. So
I do
yeah,
have a question for you about
yeah.
that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a lot to carry in your heart as you're putting a book together. That is, this thing, this message that you're sharing, how you're sharing it. But the writing process of writing something timeless, right? If that's you're carrying that inside of you. What do you tell someone? Because that may or may not happen, right? Do you feel that people come to you, the people you're calling in, that this is the thing they already are carrying, like they know that this is something
Yeah,
that is their goal as part of the writing process? You may not like this question, but
good question.
it's a big question, right?
I think that what ends up happening is that it's like a wellspring from within. And the writing process just keeps pointing the author back to what's deeply true for them.
Yeah.
That thing that's deeply true, regardless of what's going on outside, what is happening in like there's something in the writing process that keeps anchoring the reader back, the writer back into their own wellspring of wisdom. And
Yeah.
that's where this, when I talk about these works as being timeless, it's not something to strive for. It's something that emerges organically without it having to be like the North Star is always what's my story and what's deeply true for me. And then from there, that timeless wisdom just is. It
Yeah.
just, it just is. And that's what I find so fascinating about editing and working with editing these truly great works of the heart is that um how many different configurations of love exist in the world, like infinite, and here's another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually am really glad you asked that question because I don't want people to get so caught up in thinking about the sweeping arc of you know human evolution that they aren't that they're intimidated or that
Yeah.
they're forgetting that the deep truth of their heart is that already and we're
Right.
just expressing it, we're just articulating it. So I'm really glad you asked that question. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then here it is, somehow communicated through a cover design. And
Yeah.
it's often
Yeah.
so much simpler. The process is often so much simpler than it sounds. Like I'm when it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
Well,
Great question.
thank you for letting me, bring a few questions. These are the
Oh,
things I've seen come up, you know, with people where people get stuck or bogged down,
yeah.
and I think you've obviously given it a lot of you've sensed into a lot of this already, going through it for yourself, and with the clients you've worked with. So awesome.
It's always different. It's always fun. All right. Tune in next time for phase 3.
Are we gonna give them a hint, or do they have to face it?
Oh, phase 3 launch.
All
The
right.
book
Oh,
comes in
good.
the world. Yeah, I love that.
Okay.